All right, we are live here with Henry McKenna, Ryan Hedges, and myself, Alex Wolford. We're going to be talking about some classic sports debates. We have Henry, who's working for the MLB Network. He's been a sports reporter, a blogger, a writer, a logger, a content producer. He kind of does it all. And Ryan Hedges, our analyst over there, and producer of Moral Hazard in Major League Baseball, a contract's effect on future performance. And myself, I've worked for CBS doing logging and NBC working on their digital team for the Olympics and also for the NHL. So we're going to start here just I think it's the most relevant topic today, kind of watching where LeBron James is going to end up. I want to ask you, Henry, what you think. Who will have a more impressive career when it's all said and done, Michael Jordan or LeBron James?
I think thus far it's a pretty easy answer. It's going to be Michael Jordan. He, I mean, it comes down to championships, and MJ is just on track to outdo LeBron in a big way. I think there's also something to be said about the fact that MJ did it with just one team. I know that, and I totally respect what LeBron is doing, which is sort of shopping around, looking for the best possible team. That's his prerogative as a free agent. That's his prerogative as a player in the NBA. And if winning championships is what he wants to do, and that's how modern NBA society measures, the greatness of a player, which LeBron wants to be the greatest, then that's his right to go out and find the best team that's going to help him win championships. But I still think that LeBron is going to be the guy. MJ has got to be the guy that wins out over LeBron. Just as far as LeBron's paced out, I love what LeBron does as far as a regular season player, as far as playing every minute of the game. But MJ just has that something that LeBron I haven't seen step into that echelon yet. So it remains to be seen, obviously. But right now, I'm going to have to go with MJ.
Let's see what you got, Ryan.
So when you have this discussion, any MJ supporter can always just drop the 5 rings on you, and they can just say that's the end of discussion. That's all there is, and that's kind of like that's like a really serious cop out when you're trying to actually answer this question. So first of all, you talked about how. So I'm going to say LeBron is more impressive, will have a better career, a better overall player throughout his career. First of all, you look at the people that he plays with. I know he goes to the Heat, he plays with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, forms this trio, this monster to take down the NBA. However, although Jordan didn't jump around to a team to match up with specific players, he had his own excellent supporting cast: Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr. And so the fact that he didn't jump a team, you can give him props for that, but you can't say that he did it by himself or anything like that. In fact, LeBron, at this day and age especially, there's no way any superstar can ever do it by themselves. LeBron James is the closest person to ever come to do that when he was young with the Cavaliers. So you got to consider that. Secondly, when you look at the landscape of the NBA right now, you look at the talent now versus 20 years ago, it's the people, the herds of incredible basketball players are coming in at such a greater rate than they used to be. So you got to take into account how just the whole talent pool has been diluted over the past 10 to 15 years. The amount of money invested in Division I college basketball, which ultimately trickles down into the NBA. There's just so many more great players out there that are competing against you, yet LeBron is still the closest thing to Hercules in the NBA that you can imagine. I'm personally a Celtics fan, and I watched him do unbelievable things against the Celtics in the 2011 playoffs in Game 6 with his whole team up against the wall. He was the closest thing to an athlete god that I had ever seen, And it was, while it was incredibly frustrating, it was one of the most impressive athletic performances I've ever witnessed.
I think I'm gonna have to kind of make a distinction and disagree with you guys both, because I think you can't really make the ring argument any long. I mean, obviously you still can, but I don't think when it's all said and done, it's going to be that different. I don't think it's, and I think, Ryan, you meant to say 6 for Michael Jordan. But if you're going to make the ring argument, then why don't you just say Bill Russell is the best player of all time, which he very well may be. But I think if you're going to make that ring argument, you can make people who are constantly and only support that ring argument are getting a little nervous today. They were feeling very secure a few years ago with that argument, but today they're shaking in their boots a little bit.
Excuse me.
No, I was just going to say I think the distinction I'm going to try and make is that Michael Jordan was probably the purest scorer of all time. He could just, I mean, the guy averaged 31, almost 32 points a game. He basically played 13 seasons, and he won 6 championships, not including the 2 seasons he came back 3 years later. But he averaged 35 plus points per game multiple times in the playoffs. And I think no one will be as dynamic a scorer as Michael Jordan was. However, I think LeBron James will have a more impressive career as a all-around basketball player, all-around athlete. The guy picks his shots like no one else. He shot 565 this last playoffs. Like, that's unheard of. And how much he can just pick the correct time to do what he does, and how often he can do that is very impressive. And I think when it's all said and done, that will outweigh what Michael Jordan did. Go ahead, Henry.
Yeah, the only argument that I would lay into both you guys is, where does his career, if you break it down into moments, where do those moments fit in the all-time great? So, I mean, your original question was MJ or LeBron, and then you brought in the idea of Bill Russell, but those Bill Russell and MJ have had sort of galvanizing moments where in the NBA Finals or throughout playoffs for MJ, they've hit shots that have just sort of set forth their career. LeBron is kind of the guy who has through attrition come to high averages. And like you said, Wolford, a good all-around player. His statistics will always impress. The thing about MJ that really I love is that ability to hit that final shot that's going to win. And thus far we haven't seen it in LeBron, and frankly, the fact that we haven't seen it yet makes me concerned that we'll never see it. His current record, and I know that we've kind of strayed away from the idea of NBA championships, but could you imagine if LeBron had a 1-3 record in NBA championships? Would we even be having this discussion? And thanks to Ray Allen, we are, by my estimation, obviously. I mean, you guys, if we were in 1-3, we may still be having this conversation, but if Ray Allen hadn't hit that shot, which followed LeBron James missing a 3 in Game 6 of last year's NBA, not this last one, but the NBA Finals, it would be, I mean, LeBron would be absolute meat to sports media. I mean, nobody everybody would be ready to lay into him. And so, I just have a problem with that right now. Like that missed shot that he had then, his inability to hit those shots makes me nervous as far as the best. The best hits that shot. And in my mind, that's why LeBron doesn't quite surpass MJ.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I agree with that 100%. But I do think, how many times down the stretch has he might not have that one moment you're talking about yet, but how many times down the stretch has he gone 5 for 5, 6 for 6, 7 for 7 on his last 7 shots of the game, and he's hit them all. And he's put the game away through that. I'm sorry we can't have a SportsCenter top 10 and show all 7 of those shots, or he didn't have the flu. But the fact is he put the game away. The game's over because of him, and the 7 shots he hit in a row with the game on the line. Yeah, the seconds weren't counting down to 0. You didn't have 3 seconds to do a turnaround fadeaway, unbelievable shot that the greatest hits. But he put the game away, and he has done that time and time again.
Along with that, there's also, I can't think of a player who can put a team on his back like LeBron can. And you can start all the way back in Cleveland when he's by himself, but then even in what he did in Cleveland, but then even today and in 2012 when Chris Bosh is basically a no-name on the bench during the playoffs, he's scoring no points, and LeBron is doing everything. And then this past playoffs when he leaves the court and suddenly the Heat are a completely different team. Just his presence on the court, he has the ability to take over a game and lift a team up like no individual that I know has the ability to do.
Henry, what do you think?
I'm going to stick with MJ.
I think right now I'm going to say MJ. I think when it's all said and done, it's going to be LeBron.
I don't remember very well watching Jordan, but I can't imagine being more dazzled and in utter disbelief than I am from what I've seen from LeBron. I'm definitely going to stick with LeBron, unfortunately.
All right, well, let's move on to the next topic here. We'll go from talking about the greatest in basketball to talking about hands down the greatest to ever play the game on ice. That's Wayne Gretzky. Will anyone ever put up numbers that are even remotely close to the outrageous numbers he put up throughout his career? What do you think, Ryan?
I could not imagine somebody making the argument that somebody will come even remotely close to the numbers that Wayne Gretzky put up. For 9 seasons out of his career, he put up over 150 points. And something like 4 or 5, or I think 4 seasons, he went over 200. It's been almost 20 years that somebody has put up over 130 points. The last person who put up 120 points was Sidney Crosby back in 2005. What Gretzky did, followed a little bit by Mario Lemieux, is we'll never see on American soil or Canadian soil ever again. And I want to go back to how the evolution of the hockey talent pool. That's one thing. Again, there's just the amount of awareness and opportunity that young people are gaining at this day and age to play hockey and move up through the ranks to get to the NHL. The difference between the best players in the league and the worst players in the league is so much smaller now than it was 30 years ago, that allowed players like Gretzky and Lemieux and Esposito to dominate. You'll never see a domination kind of like that. Also, back in 1982, the average goals scored per game was above 4. The past 3 years, it's been under 2.75. So just become the style of play and the emphasis on defense. That's just another big factor that will play into these types of scoring numbers will never be touched ever again.
Yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely agree. I had to break it down and see if there was anything that maybe someone could touch at some point. And the only thing I was thinking was 92 goals in a season. And then you look at it, Ovi scored 65 in 07-08. Lemieux, you have to go way back to the mid-90s when he scored 69. Stamkos scored 60 2 years ago. We're still only 2/3 of the way there. We're not even. I mean, we're not close. And then you look at career points. I mean, we're still witnessing Jaromir Jagr playing, who is an all-time great. And he is still over 1,100 points shy of Wayne Gretzky's career. I mean, he would have to play another 8 seasons in his prime to touch Wayne Gretzky. That's ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. We'll never see anything like it.
Yeah, Wayne, Jaromir Jagr is kind of the last player that kind of started in that era in the early 90s where, you could put up, the best high score in the league put up over 140 points. And yeah, I mean, he's gonna be gone. He actually did produce the past few years, but I mean, he won't come close to that career mark. Definitely should think, if you look at the lockout, the bright side of the 2005 lockout, the amount of goals scored jumped up a good amount from that, but we'll never see people averaging 2.5 goals a game like we could have in the past.
That's the only aspect I was thinking is the changes they made to the game after the lockout to allow for more goal scoring. If they continue to make subtle changes to possibly allow a little more goal scoring, you could have someone like a Crosby or a Stamkos or an Ovi or come out and maybe score 70 goals in a season. But I mean, I don't think no one's ever gonna touch anything like Wayne Gretzky did.
And try to imagine like a LeBron James of the NHL coming in, even just like a Herculean figure, and that could potentially rise up to the Gretzky levels. And the people you've already mentioned who've come close to that are the Stamkos and Ovechkin and Crosby, yet they are still so far in such a different league. I couldn't ever imagine.
He was absolutely ahead of his time. I mean, he was the first guy to start he was thinking about scoring goals off of defenseman skates and stuff, and he just thought of the game in a different way than anyone else at that time. He was just way ahead of his time, and the game was changing rapidly, but he was already there. And I don't think we're going to see that kind of change in the game really in our lifetime.
Don't go to where the puck is. Go to where it will be.
Thank you. On that note, let's head into current sports and say you're the GM of your own Major League Baseball team, and you have to take one player to build your franchise. Who do you take? Who wants to jump in?
Well, I'll hop in. First of all, I'm frankly offended that I was not consulted about the Wayne Gretzky stats. These guys mugged me about my limited knowledge about the NHL. Anyways, I've got to go with Mike Trout. As far as a stand-up franchise character, an absolute phenomenal batter and an outstanding fielder. Yeah, I mean he's the full package. It's tempting to pick a pitcher in this situation. You can build a franchise around pitching and defense, but pitchers don't bat. Pitchers don't field very often, obviously, and so I gotta lean towards a young guy who's basically a slam dunk, from your franchise, from a winning perspective, and then from a marketing perspective as well. He's a great kid. So that to me is a no-brainer.
Ryan, what do you think? Go for it.
I was going to talk about Mike Trout as well. So if you would like to, actually no, let me continue to tout Mike Trout. So as Henry already laid out, the basics, but to get in a little deeper, he was 20 years old when he came into the league. Sorry, he was mixed up. He was 18 years old 2 years ago in 2012 when he came into the league, won Rookie of the Year, led the league in OPS, should have won the MVP, but it got stolen from the Triple Crown winning Miguel Cabrera, who you had to give it to. That's a different issue, but any day of the week I would have given the MVP to Mike Trout. As Henry already discussed, he's a five-tool player that you see maybe once a decade come around. He's got speed and power that you rarely witnessed before. He led the league in runs each of the past 2 years. He's putting up career numbers again this year. I just think that, as Henry also mentioned, he's another class act, not a guy you would ever run into issues off the field with. He's never been on the DL. He's had a great health history, keeps himself in good shape. You might make an argument for Clayton Kershaw. However, I think he would be a good argument. However, I'd just be worried about putting your eggs in a basket of a guy who does have the potential to be the pitcher of the decade, but he just came off a month and a half stint on the DL as a young kid. You never know that I'd be worried that him potentially running into just health issues as he gets older. And I think that it's a very safe and strong bet going with Mike Trout.
I think we just made history because I think this is the first time this trio has probably agreed in some sort of sports debate. Because I have Mike Trout written down right here for my number one pick. Which, I mean, you guys touched on everything pretty much. I mean, he's a 40-40 guy. He's five-tool player. He's got it all. And I was leaning towards Kershaw originally, but in this day and age, it's so hard to put all your eggs in one basket in a pitcher because, I mean, how many top-notch pitchers go through 10 years or whatever without getting injured? Go through 5 years without getting injured? I mean, there's no way they're not going to have some sort of shoulder, elbow, some sort of injury. Mm-hmm. And I think it's hard to bank on that to start your career versus a guy who's going to go out there and play every single day and give you everything he's got. I think the only other guys you could maybe Giancarlo Stanton, but we don't see enough yet. I think there are a couple of guys who we have to wait and see. Bryce Harper potentially got a cannon. Great potential, but it's hard to really argue why you wouldn't take your first overall pick with Mike Trout. I don't know if there's really anything left to say. You guys, that's a clean sweep.
Yeah, you talked about pitchers, and it's a no-brainer. It's so difficult to look at pitchers seriously when you consider Steven Strasburg and Jose Fernandez, Josh Johnson, just people who come into the league with potential so high, like you can envision them being future Hall of Famers, and they just run into arm issues immediately or just health issues in general.
Yeah, you watch it happen time and time again. All right, well then let's move on. Let's go to the NFL. Henry, take your number one pick.
So this one is tough. I think each one of us is probably going to pick a quarterback. And my guess is that if you're probably tossing around the idea of Andrew Luck or Russell Wilson, maybe not even Russell Wilson. Maybe Mike Trout is, or maybe Andrew Luck is the Mike Trout of this debate. But I do like Russell Wilson. That's my guy. I just think he presents such an outstanding skill set that most importantly he proves he can win games and now a championship. He is mobile in a way that that the game is definitely evolving. It's not evolving in a way that it's necessary to be mobile. I think that the Peyton Mannings and Tom Brady's of the world are not gone. They'll be around. I think that the league is experimenting with more mobile quarterbacks. But again, Russell Wilson is smart about how he uses his mobility. He's statistically sound. He is mechanically sound and mentally sound. I'm impressed by him. Every week I watch him play football, and there's always that temptation to go with a guy like Andrew Luck, who has a cannon, who's got on paper everything John Elway had, who maybe more. But there's something more important in my mind to be said about a kid who came in the third round and won a championship before the first overall pick. So I got to go with my boy Russell.
Hedge, do it.
All right. Henry, I totally agree about the quarterback situation. You can't build a team around a running back at this day and age. You got to build a team around a quarterback if you're gonna year after year put yourself in team in a position to compete for a Super Bowl. So I know I'm going to get some grief for this pick, but I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers. So Aaron Rodgers, right now he's 31 years old, so he's maybe he's over his peak, but you know what you're going to be getting for the next at least 3, 4, 5 years. You're still going to be getting an elite quarterback. And in the NFL, you can't be planning for 10 years in advance at this day and age. So you can pick a young Andrew Luck, and yeah, maybe he would be a safe bet. But you know that with picking Andrew Luck, you know you're going to get another 4 or 5 elite years. And you look at, he was injured this past year, but 2 or 3 years ago, he only had 6 picks each of those years, and it was putting very high TD numbers. He's got the highest QB rating of all active quarterbacks. He can still run. I just think that if you're going to build an NFL team from scratch, you can't plan for 10 years in a row. But when you plan for 3 to 5 years, going with Aaron Rodgers is a very safe bet. And if you give him a healthy set of tools to play with, then he'll even show you something more, because he's been plagued with injured running backs, injured receivers for the past few years. You give him healthy tools, you'll be in contention every single year.
So I tossed around the idea of Johnny Football first, and then Eli Manning, of course. but I'm gonna go with the guy when you ask this question, that the first guy that everyone thinks of, and that's Andrew Luck. I think Henry, you hit the nail on the head originally. And I think it's hard to say that if you don't put Andrew Luck in Russell Wilson's shoes, he's not going having a Super Bowl parade and holding up the MVP trophy maybe. I think he's surrounded by talent, and I think he has talent. I think he's arguably the smartest quarterback in the NFL. And I just think I'm excited to see what he can do. And I think he's a gamer. I mean, the guy's an absolute stud in terms of he'll bring you back. How many comebacks did he have in his rookie season? How many times is he going to bring you back out of a ball game, and he's just going to put you right back in it? He's going to be an incredible quarterback. He's going to have an incredible career. And I'm not thinking about 10 years down the road by taking this pick. He's going to win for me right now. He's going to win this season. He's going to win next season, and he's going to win for another 15 years. Unlike you're going to take Aaron Rodgers, you're going to get 3 or 4 years. I mean, the guy's already injury prone. I mean, I don't know. I think
just thinking about his fantasy team.
I'm going to win again. No, I think Andrew Luck. I mean, I wouldn't I think Andrew Luck is an excellent pick, and he knows how to win. He's got 11-5 in his freshman and sophomore year. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Tom Brady. He's got a little bit of Tom Brady in him, and I do agree he does have potential to be winning 10+ years from now. I just think, I totally agree with most of what you said. I just think that going with Aaron Rodgers, you're putting yourself in a great position to win in the next few years.
I wouldn't mind Andrew Rodgers, a little bit of Aaron, little bit of Andrew. That sounds pretty good to me. I'll take the cocktail.
All right, let's go GM of the NHL. Hedge, start us off.
So the NHL is plagued with young talent. So there's so many excellent options that you could choose from. And would be a very valid choice just to go with Sidney Crosby as well. And you'll get guys like Tyler Seguin, who just had an incredible year, Jamie Benn, Matt Duchene. However, I love Nathan McKinnon. The second-line center for the Avs has shown extraordinary things in his freshman year. He was first overall pick in the 2013 entry draft and immediately came out as an absolute stud. He was unanimous Rookie of the Year and brought Colorado from a last place in all of the Western Conference last year to first place in their division this year. And they went from 26th in goals scored 2 years ago to 4th in goals scored this past year. He's absolutely electric. He's got an incredible plus-minus. I think that he's still 18 right now. He's going to be a force for many years to come. And building your team around a person like this, you're setting yourself up for at least a decade of relevant seasons where McKinnon is offensively keeping you in the hunt every single year.
Henry, you want to take over, or you want me to respond to that?
Let me jump in, and then you can hop on both of our answers. I'm sure you'll have opinions on them. So I'm going to go with PK Subban. I was tempted to take a Capitals player like Ovi, or Evgeny Kuznetsov. No, I'm kidding. But I just love what Subban has done over the last few years. The guy struggled a little bit. He struggled with the spotlight. He didn't get along with his teammates very much. But I really like what he did with that sort of bad boy image, where he became, he kind of stuck with sort of like being a jerk. But he was your jerk if he's your teammate, like he's your guy, and I think that's pretty essential for a cornerstone of our locker room, especially on any hockey team. And then what he's doing with his ability to put up points, just improving every year. Creating goal scoring opportunities for his teammates. Putting in a few himself, and why wouldn't you want him on your team? He's the guy that you could really get going with. He's the guy you should start your franchise with.
I understand the have a guy on your team that everyone's gonna hate, but you love to have him on your team. I understand that he's kind of like a Lucic or a Brad Marchand. And I absolutely despised him, watching him flop around during the playoffs. But I think both of you guys are failing to really think about what you're gonna build your team around. I think Hedge taking McKinnon, I have nothing wrong with the kid. He's an absolute stud, as you said. He's probably one of the, if not the fastest guy in the NHL. He's up there, and one of the quickest as well. He's incredible amount of skill. but I think you're thinking too much as a sleeper pick. Like you could get Nathan McKinnon. You could get him 10th overall. You could get him 15th overall. I think there are a lot of guys you could get, and you mentioned Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin. You're not even going to mention like Steven Stamkos or like some of the already proven best players in the NHL. And I think I'm going to take a goaltender and take a guy who's raised the cup over his head 2 times in the last 3 years, and go ahead and take Jonathan Quick, a good Connecticut boy. And I just think if you're going to build your franchise, you watch the teams that go far in the playoffs, the teams that win cups. They're goaltenders who have won Vezina trophies, who put up 920 save percentage, 930 save percentage. They're guys who can absolutely turn a game around. I mean, you watched the Rangers. Obviously, I'm a big Rangers fan. I got the jersey here, but I mean, the talent on the squad itself was good, not great. But you watched what Henrik Lundqvist did in the Penguins series, how he absolutely single-handedly turned that series around, and you can rely on someone like that 100% to win you the game. You can win 1-0. You can not even play great. You can have 10 shots, 15 shots, and be outshot, outplayed, everything, and you could still win the game. You can raise the cup over your head. I think that's a kind of player that you absolutely need to build your franchise around.
Personally, I have trouble building a franchise around a goalie, and while you said that, you have Vezina trophy winning goalies winning the Stanley Cup, there have been a couple instances of that. However, there's kind of been the complete opposite of that as well. And before I get to that, you mentioned Henrik Lundqvist, and he's undoubtedly one of the best goalies in the NHL. However, this year was the first year that they've made it far in the playoffs, and usually they struggle to make the playoffs. And Jonathan Quick is one of the few examples that you can pick out where a great goaltender has consistently led their team deep into the playoffs. And then you look at a team like the Red Wings or the Blackhawks especially. Corey Crawford is the most overrated goaltender just because of the team around him, and it makes me sick when Corey Crawford gets touted, because that team could be so much deadlier with an excellent goalie. And don't get me wrong, in the playoffs, your goalie needs to be red hot, and having an excellent goalie is very necessary to win a Stanley Cup. I just think building a franchise around an elite goalie is risky and isn't, and you can win championships like with a Corey Crawford having a below average goalie.
I think we're kind of caught in the pitcher and the batter fielder discussion again. It's a similar idea, I think, between goalies and everyone else in hockey. But Wooly, I'll have to admit that Quick would probably be my number 2 overall. And I'll side with you a little bit on that I think that he has done something that few goaltenders can do. The only thing I worry about is, what makes him great, which is that he's one of the only players that's on the ice the whole game long, is that he is one of the only guys that's on the ice the whole game long. So you're incredibly reliant on him. You need his head to be right. You need his body to be right. And so that's why I'm a little tenuous to make him my number 1 overall pick, but I respect it.
Well, Ryan, I don't know if I agree with. I mean, you have guys like, obviously legends, but Marty Brodeur, Dominic Hasek, Patrick Waugh, and then Jonathan Quick. You have your own Timmy Thomas. You have player goaltenders who can single-handedly carry a team, and you could say that about your Bruins. Is that, I mean, how much skill and talent is up front for them? Do they have a guy like Nathan McKinnon? No, but they have a lot of grit. They play the game right, and they rely a lot on their incredible cat of a goaltender in Tuukka Rask. And that's why you guys are arguably have been the best team in the Eastern Conference for a long time now.
I think the Bruins situation is kind of a debate within itself, but you are right. Tuukka Rask was incredible this year, and before you did mention legends and Watt and Brodeur, and they're legends. So there are a few goaltenders in history who can carry a team year after year. But Tim Thomas was a backup goaltender for years. He was a no-name until he was like 35, and then he suddenly had the best season of his career. And I think a lot of it has to do with the team that you play on. The Bruins play a real, like you said, they don't have the studs who score, they're not that fast. They're not the best passing team. Actually, no, they are a good passing team, but they don't have finesse and score pretty goals. They rely on an incredible coach. They block a lot of shots, and they play an incredible system that allows goaltenders to thrive in. So I do want to give Tuukka a lot of credit, though. I do think that he is a cat, like you said, and he is incredible. But it's just tough. It's a lot of great goaltending has to do with the team around them.
No, I agree. It's a lot to do with the system. But I think building a franchise around someone who can really carry a team on their back when they really need it most. Like when it comes down to it, if you're going to play in Game 7 and you're up 2-1, there's a couple minutes left, and you're getting peppered. Like who wins? Like who's going to win you that game? Who's closing that game out for you? It's the guy you started your franchise. You built your franchise around.
Yeah, but how'd you get up 2-1?
Because your fourth line center scored a dirty rebound goal. All right, let's move on. All right, we've got 2 topics left. I think we'll save probably one that's going to be the most heated for last. So let's talk about just what you think one record in sports that will never, ever, ever be broken. Hedge, you got something?
Sure, I'll start. So, I mean, there's so many. There are a handful of records that you can make an argument for, and there are a few that are just can shape to be incredibly dazzling. However, I want to talk about Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak. It was 1940. I'm gonna blow it. So I'm not even gonna say it. But it was back in the 40s, and DiMaggio hitting 56 straight games. The number 2 record was Pete Rose, 56 straight games. Pete Rose, who hit in 46 straight games, and then after that, it just drops off incredibly. I think the 3rd place and 4th place, it goes down, and so when you talk about odds, you take I did the math out. You take a 300 batting average hitter. The odds that on any at-bat that he's going to go out, if you say he gets 4 at-bats in a game, the odds that on any day he's going to start a 56-game hitting streak is 1 in 4.8 million. And that's just a number that, when you talk about, in a lifetime, you will never see something like that again. And on Joe DiMaggio's specific streak, there were a handful of just improbable ninth inning. He comes to the bat ninth inning where he just and when he was in the 40s, I think he had two different times where he came hitless into the ninth inning, and one of the times it made sense for the pitchers to intentionally walk him, but at that time, from my understanding, they pitched to him just to give him the chance to get that hit. So there were just throughout his 56 games, there was just a good bunch of improbable, smaller points where he should have lost it, and 56 straight games of getting a hit just is we'll never see that again in our lifetime. I can tell you that.
All right, well, I'm going to start with a number for you guys. It's 2,632. That's the number of consecutive starts for Cal Ripken Jr. I think we will all probably talk about streaks that will be ingrained in history, mostly because of societal, or rather like current sports culture changing. Hedges, you nailed one on the head there by pointing out that people actually pitch to someone who was on a hit streak. That just doesn't happen anymore. Ripken has a start streak that the active pursuer is Prince Fielder, and he's got, I think, a little over 500. I'm not totally sure. So it's just not going to happen. I think that we might all name records that probably will never get broken, but for me, when you're talking about a number that's pretty safe in the thousands, as opposed to, you know, a Wayne Gretzky number like 90 points, you know, people have last year gotten 2/3 of the way there, and in baseball right now, like I said, someone's not even a quarter of the way there, and they won't be for a long time. Again, I mean, Prince Fielder will probably take a day off. He's clearly overdue for one. He spent all day on the body issue for ESPN, and so I just think that's unbeatable. He's an Iron Man, and you don't really see that very often in sports. So that's my record. I'm gonna stick with it.
I'm dying. I think Prince Fielder needs a day off, probably. I think he's gonna take one at some point. No, I mean, I think those two are probably the most absurd records, individual records in sports. I think, as you guys both mentioned, neither of them will ever be broken. It's so clear to everyone that those will never be broken. It would be impossible for someone to do that again. And I would have said either of those, but I also think what we talked about earlier, Wayne Gretzky, 2,857 career points. Mark Messier is number 2 with 1,800. So he's about 1,300. He's about 1,030, I think, behind, and scoring 1,000 points. You have to play in your prime. In today's day and age, you have to play in your prime for another 10 seasons. Mark Messier played well into his 40s. We've had to play well into his 70s for this to ever have happened, and it's something that will never ever be matched. As will none of these will be matched. But I don't think Wayne Gretzky's will ever be broken.
All very true statements.
All right, let's move on into a good classic football debate about your Tom Brady versus the man, the legend, Peyton Manning. I know what both of you are going to say. So why don't we start with Henry?
Sure. Yeah, at this point, it's a little bit closer than I'd like it to be. Let's be clear. So obviously, it's easy. It's Tom Brady. I made the argument earlier, and I'll make it again. It's similar to MJ and LeBron with Peyton and Tom Brady. Peyton right now has a losing record in the Super Bowl. If you ask, I would say nine. I mean, I'm pulling this out of nowhere, but I would say 90% of NFL players, if you ask them what their goal is in the league, it would be to win the Super Bowl. If you ask them what it meant to be successful, it would be to win the Super Bowl. That's just, the crown and jewel of our major four sports leagues, in my mind. And Tom Brady has done it. And he made it look easy first few times. Admittedly, the last 2 times have not looked easy. And that's been a product of our tough opponent, as much as it pains me to say it, the New York Giants. But Peyton does such a good job in the regular season, setting and breaking every record category pretty much this year. But the one thing I'll point out is that Tom Brady set those records that he broke, and Peyton Manning had a better crew this time around. And at a certain point, you're kind of comparing apples and oranges. They're different animals, and we're so lucky to be able to watch them face off as many times as they have. But for me, Peyton Manning's been spoiled his whole career. The place where they got selected in the draft kind of summarizes what their careers have been like. And Tom Brady is really, honestly, Bill Belichick has not done what he should to surround Tom Brady, and it's probably the only thing that I would criticize of Bill Belichick is that he doesn't spoil Tom Brady enough, because one of the only times that he did in his career, like I mentioned, Tom Brady broke the records. So, in my mind, it's easy. It's got to be Tom. Ryan?
Yeah, Henry, you hit the nail on the head. And like you said, that Peyton's been spoiled his whole career, Brady's not. And while he hasn't been spoiled, Tom Brady has this incredible talent at turning a no-name receiver, some who have been in the league already for a little while, into stars. You take Wes Welker, who was always solid, but he became a superstar when he came into New England. Deion Branch, Brady turned Deion Branch into a star. Jabbar Gaffney. If you go even further back, you look at David Patton and David Givens.
Edelman, a 100 reception receiver.
Yeah. Currently, Julian Edelman, another current example. And what's unfortunate for Brady is the wide receiver turnover ratio. He only has these receivers for like a year or two, and then they're gone. There's only been, he had Troy Brown at the beginning for 4 or 5 years. He had Wes Welker for 4 or 5 years. But other than that, he's working with a different cast, a totally renewed cast every few years. And so, yes, Peyton Manning has put up incredible numbers, incredible statistics, and even Madden NFL video games might give Peyton a better ranking than Tom Brady. However, there's a reason you play the game, and Tom Brady is 9-4 against Peyton Manning, and he's won more Super Bowls, and he's just performed better in the postseason when it matters. So while Peyton Manning might, have better be rated higher by analysts and he might pick by some people as a greater quarterback, and when you look at career statistics as well, there's a reason you play the game, and Tom Brady has showed that throughout his career.
I mean, okay, so I think there are a couple points to be made here. One is, I think there's you're going to always ask the question, is it the receiver who makes the quarterback, or is it the quarterback who makes the receiver? And I think there are so many instances where you have receivers who Peyton Manning has been throwing the ball to, as Tom Brady has, who have made these receivers incredible phenomenons who have gone on to do much less or kind of nothing elsewhere. And I think first that's an argument to be made. And I think also, obviously, this is a team sport we're talking about. We're not. This is very difficult to say that head to head Tom Brady beat Peyton Manning. I know they both had very strong teams, but it's not like Tom Brady's going out there and facing up against Peyton Manning. I mean, it's really not. It's not happening. It's Tom Brady is facing up against the Colts defense or the Broncos defense, and Peyton Manning is doing the same against the Patriots defense. I think it is hard to make the argument for Peyton Manning just because of the Super Bowls, the rings. Although we are watching Tom Brady's record in the Super Bowl get worse and worse. We're watching his record in the playoffs get worse and worse. I think we're watching the decline of Tom Brady happen sooner than we're watching the decline of Peyton Manning, which is, I mean, they're essentially the same age. Peyton Manning's like 7 months older than Tom Brady. But I think we're witnessing a sooner decline of Tom Brady. I think that's the only argument I can make for Peyton Manning. The numbers are very comparable. Peyton Manning has better numbers in the regular season. Tom Brady has the rings. But, I mean, it's obviously a toss-up. It's why we're having the debate. They're both incredible quarterbacks. I think I would have to agree with Henry, your first point of saying what does it mean to be successful? And that has to be winning a Super Bowl. I think that is what it's all about.
Yeah, you mentioned that you talk about the decline of Tom Brady, and especially in relation to Peyton Manning. And when you look at this past year, absolutely. I mean, Peyton put up one of the greatest performances in throughout a season in history. However, you take away this past year, you could argue the complete opposite. 2 years ago, Tom Brady was in the Super Bowl. 2007, he was in the Super Bowl again. If one drive went the other way in each of those Super Bowls, Tom Brady could have 5 Super Bowls. So this past season, yes, but I think we give it another season before we can say that Tom Brady is declining while Peyton is thriving.
But 2 years ago, I mean, Peyton Manning's in the hospital getting surgery on his neck. He wasn't there to compete, and he comes back from that and puts up one of the probably. We'll have to look at the numbers here, but I would say for his age, there's no way anyone at that age put up better numbers in the history of the game.
Well, nobody's put up those kinds of numbers in the history of the game, regardless of age. So yeah, that's very true. And as mentioned, he was breaking Tom Brady's records, which is impressive, right? That he's breaking the guy who I'm saying is the best guy in the league right now. So the argument that Brady's falling off is just false. You know, the fact that he was without Rob Gronkowski, he was without Danny Amendola, he was trying to mentor 3 rookie receivers in Aaron Dobson and Kenbrell Tompkins and Josh Boyce, trying to get those guys up to speed on what is, you know, arguably the hardest offenses to learn for wide receivers. It's turned away way too many receivers in the past in terms of essentially making them into draft busts. And so with Julian Edelman as his most viable and really only viable threat, Tom Brady still managed to put the Patriots atop the AFC East, which admittedly was not football's strongest conference, but the fact that they had the home field advantage for playoffs with the roster that they had has to go to Tom Brady, and it was a prolific season for him as far as context and wins, and so I think it was something very profound that will never get enough credit, is what Tom Brady did this season. It's what he does best. It's win. So that's what those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think.
Where would you put Eli Manning in this discussion?
I would just say he's an elite quarterback, and we'll leave it at
Put him on the shelf.
We're yet to see. He does have 2 Super Bowl MVPs, which is a debate in itself. We could maybe move on to saying who's better between Tom Brady and Eli Manning.
Well, it's pretty easy. It's Tom.
If the name of the game, talking about all that matters is winning Super Bowls and winning Super Bowl MVPs.
Mm-hmm. Well, MVPs are definitely a relevant part of the discussion, I think, but Super Bowls as a whole, Tom Brady would have gotten those MVPs had the Patriots won.
And like I mentioned, they were one defensive drive away from getting those Super Bowls. And
everyone is one defensive drive away from getting those Super Bowls, except for this past season. That's not an argument.
Yeah, I agree with Wooly here. Sorry, Hedge. That Super Bowls are and most football games can often be attributed to one drive. And again, I think that, like I was trying to say before, like MVPs are often just sort of attributed to the best player on the winning team. So had the Patriots won, that would have gone to Tom Brady. So I think using that as evidence is not necessarily like substantial in my mind. But I do think that your argument that head-to-head Brady has beaten, Eli Manning has beaten Brady 2 times in the most important game. But when you consider the body of work that's just beyond that, I think that there is the idea of like end all be all Super Bowl wins are important, but they're not everything, right? We were trying to compare, prolific seasons between Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. They're comparable. We're trying to see the greater body of work over their careers. They will likely be comparable. And then we get to Super Bowls, and they're not comparable. So the difference between Eli Manning, statistically, he's poor. As a leader, he's poor. He's just in my mind, he's not in that upper echelon. No one would put him there in a greater body of work. In Super Bowls and head-to-head, when you isolate that, then yes. But that's the only argument that you have, which is a good one up to a point, and then you bring in everything else, and then in my mind, it's got to go back to Tom again.
You don't think Eli Manning's going to be a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, he will be.
So how can you not say in the upper epsilon? How can you not say he's one of the best all time?
Oh gosh, he's so far from elite. Any rational football fan can tell that Eli Manning does not belong in those ranks.
Will he be in the Hall of Fame?
Eli Manning
Yeah, but that's not what we're arguing.
You're arguing that he's not elite.
I never said that. I said that he's not as good as Tom Brady. That was your question.
No, you said I will not put him in the upper tier.
Oh, I won't put him beyond Tom Brady. That's what I'm saying. I'm not going to put him beyond Tom Brady or Peyton Manning.
But you just said you won't put him in the upper tier, and Ryan, you said everyone who's ever watched football can say he's not elite.
You can call him elite.
I'm not going to put him in the upper echelon through. Well, at least like in current times, definitely not. Like for next year, he's not going to be an elite quarterback. And over history, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning have galvanized themselves. Eli Manning strikes pretty much everyone as something of a fluke, some sort of blip on the football radar.
It's true. Besides both times he did win the Super Bowl, for one, they were a wild card playoff berth, and while they did go through those playoff runs, he looked very elite. Put those aside, he was so mediocre.
I think Eli has had problems with coaching. He's had problems with the system he's been in. But when you talk about it, like the plays he made down the stretch of all of those football games, and he has done that time and time again throughout his career, his numbers in the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter are unheard of. They do not compare to any of his other numbers. It doesn't make any sense. He's a straight gamer. He knows how to win a football game when it matters the most. And he has done that time and time again. He has absolutely done that. He has won so many games in the fourth quarter. And he did that in the Super Bowls. He did that in the playoff runs. He showed that he's a gamer. My computer's about to die, so I think that's it.
Classic sports debates.
All right.